So this smartphone camera takes the photography power of Hasselblad and puts it in your pocket. And this might be the best mobile photography device I've ever used. So this right here is the OPPO Find N3, a beautifully designed foldable smartphone with a huge display as well as a massive camera on the back. And this phone is taking photography extremely seriously. As you can see, the Hasselblad insignia is on the lens, and Hasselblad has its history all throughout this phone. Now, OPPO reached out to me before this phone became available to the public and asked me to test it, see how good the camera is, and OPPO is sponsoring today's video, and I really appreciate them sending me this device to test out before anyone else. It's actually kind of an honor for me, especially considering lately I've been more and more interested in mobile photography because I think this is the future. I love the innovations that are happening in these devices, and me as a professional photographer who's been using DSLRs and mirrorless for years, it's really cool to finally have the ability to make beautiful images with a device that fits into your pocket. Now, a quick disclaimer for anyone who's new here, on this channel we are focused on making beautiful photography. This is not one of those test videos where I make pictures of my mailbox, of the cat. Our goal is to create art, beautiful images that could potentially be printed, go into a book, or be proudly shared on social media. And that was my objective with the OPPO Find N3. Get images that are stunning, that I'm proud of, and really push this camera to its absolute limit. So I hope that hard work translates into the images that you see throughout this video, and if it does for you, do me a solid, hit the thumbs up button. Now briefly, I'm going to run down some of the things that I was very interested in with this phone, and throughout the video I'll explain how I feel on each one of these talking points. The first thing was the upgraded 48 megapixel native camera, which is a 24mm focal length. The OPPO Find N3 has the ability to capture RAW, so every photo that I made in this video is a RAW file that I treated exactly like a photo I would make on any of my other cameras, mirrorless or DSLR. Now, another feature that interested me was the ultra-wide camera. From what I know, it's not a huge upgrade, but I've never used an OPPO phone before, so I was excited to see what this was capable of. That is also going to be 48 megapixels. And finally, this is the feature that really excites me. 64 megapixels on the telephoto camera using the OPPO Find N3 with a 1/2 inch sensor. Foldable smartphone cameras typically miss out on telephoto features, but this has the ability to capture lossless 6x zoom images, which is absolutely preposterous. I was also very interested in the Hasselblad portrait mode, which is supposed to be a major improvement to portrait mode on smartphone cameras. I was also interested in the Hasselblad X-Pan mode, as well as the general design of this camera and how it translated to photography, being that it's a foldable phone with a large display. So first, let's talk about my experience with the standard 24mm camera on this smartphone. Now remember, these are 48 megapixel files, and they did not disappoint. As of today, these are the highest quality smartphone images I've ever made. I mean, some of these photos, I really can't distinguish them between something I make on any other camera. That's how good it is. The colors at 10-bit are beautiful, they're punchy, they're very easy to edit and manipulate as well, and I loved how easy the RAW files were to work with. There was no real strange color issues or issues with the white balance, which have been problems in the past with other mobile photography devices, but my favorite thing about all the photos I made using this 24mm wide-angle camera is just how perfect and natural they look. Typically in the past, I've been very critical of mobile cameras and how overly sharp images can look, how there's a big contrast between highlights and shadows, but this handled every situation beautifully. They don't look overly digitized. There's none of this hyper sharpness that you get in other mobile devices, and this is a big step in the right direction for mobile photography in general. Now, as for the 48 megapixel wide angle camera, the biggest difference I noticed in the OPPO Find N3 is the sharpness in the corners on wide angle photos. In the past, with basically any other mobile camera I've used, it feels like the corners are extremely soft and you get a lot of chromatic abrasion. That's been the biggest issue with these ultra wide smartphone cameras. In my opinion, the OPPO Find N3 does a great job of keeping the corners sharp. Now, they're not perfect, this isn't magic, but in my opinion, it compares to what I'm used to using low aperture ultra wide angle lenses. But the big thing that blew me away on the OPPO Find N3 3 is this 64 megapixel telephoto camera. I didn't really think I was going to use it very much during this test, but I kept finding myself going back to this camera because it was so fun to use. The fact that I can just be walking down the street, grab my phone, and make a 6x telephoto image that is lossless at 64 megapixels and have the image look like this is truly unbelievable. This is a massive step for mobile photography, and it's something that really blew me away on this device. And on top of that, when you're using this camera at those higher telephoto focal lengths, you get a natural fall off to the background of your image. So you get real bokeh from a smartphone, not digitized portrait mode or anything like that. You're getting raw files that have depth of field and sharpness. Now, speaking of portrait mode, in the past, I've been very critical of portrait mode on smartphone devices. Across the board, I've just always felt like it didn't look natural and it wasn't a true blurry background. But with the OPPO Find N3 and the Hasselblad portrait mode, this is a massive improvement to what portrait mode can do with a smartphone. In my opinion, these images, even though they are JPEGs, which I don't really love, I can't wait for smartphones to have raw portrait mode, they have a very natural fall off look to the blurry background that is being created by the smartphone. Alec has really curly hair, and his hair is a nightmare for portrait modes because typically they can't distinguish between his hair and the background, and you get these weird blotchy looks to the blur. But in the test photos I made of Alec, they look really good. They're very natural. The fall off is a nice progression. It's not this overly done look, and I really enjoyed the portrait mode images in that limited test that we did. So as for the larger sensor on this camera, it definitely lives up to the hype and does everything that you would expect. These images look beautiful. I'll just let them speak for themselves, but I really loved how much data was in these files, and I loved how much resolution you achieved as well. These photos are hands down the best mobile photos I've ever made. And it's also worth noting that this large sensor handles low light extremely well. The images that I made out on the street or in shadowy areas when I was out hiking, they look incredible. There's not a lot of grain in these photos, even at ISOs like 1600, which is not the standard with any other mobile device I've used. Really love how clean and crisp these images look. Now, one of the main contributing factors to creating images that I'm so happy with and I'm speaking so highly of is the pro capabilities on this camera. This is the closest any mobile device has come to essentially mimicking a pro style camera in a smartphone. And the reason for that is all the controls you have in the menu. With this camera, you can easily switch your ISO, you can easily switch your shutter speed, overriding any automatic settings, and the user interface is very simple. And when I was out using the camera, I found myself quickly and easily making adjustments just like I would with a standard mirrorless camera, and that was something that I was very, I guess, not used to when it comes to mobile photography. And what made it even easier was the foldable design. The fact that the display was so large made it really easy to go in, customize those settings on the fly, and still see everything that you were doing. I was a little skeptical about such a large display when I first got this in hand, but it made the photography experience much more enjoyable. And also that folding design allowed to easily do things like interval timer. You essentially have a tripod built into the camera, so you can set it up, set it to interval timer like any other camera, and capture images of yourself. Personally, one of my favorite photos on the day was me walking up those stairs, and I captured that using the timer with this setup just like this. Just had it folded in half, had the camera facing down, had it set on a ledge, and I created that image of myself. So if you're out making a lot of photography alone and you want to capture some type of portrait, this phone does a great job of giving you everything you need to do that without lugging around a tripod. Now, another cool feature built into this camera is the Hasselblad X-Pan mode, giving you the ability to essentially emulate the signature Hasselblad X-Pan look. I thought that was a really cool nod to Hasselblad to build that into the UI on this device, and it was a fun thing to test out and experiment with. I also tested out briefly the time-lapse mode while I was working on some edits. I thought that was cool, pretty standard to what you would expect. I also tested out video, and the video quality is great, the stabilization is great, but I didn't give it a really fair shake. I just messed around with it a little bit, but I did enjoy the image quality in those videos. But all in all, on the photography side of things, this thing's a beast. absolutely incredible. I'm really excited to see what the future of mobile photography is. This is definitely taking us in a direction that is positive and makes me excited to see what smartphones in the future will do, and I'm especially excited to see what OPPO can do as they continue to improve on this foldable camera line. So if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you are not yet, and big thank you to OPPO for sponsoring today's video and sending me the Find N3 so I can make this video and share all this information with y'all.